that's fine. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the first thing is bank versus fintechs. Well, actually, I think that's a false dilemma. Um, there is no such contradiction or war between the two players. Actually, we will see a lot of examples about how they actually not compete, but rather collaborate. The global shift in the fintech scene, we will see examples not only from a global perspective, but also from a regional angle. How is Moldova performing today? There are a lot of strengths that Moldova should look into introspectively. What are the three pillars of collaboration between the three parts of these ecosystems, regulators on the one hand, banks, and also fintechs? And finally, a call to action. So essentially, what can we, the three stakeholders, do together in order to collaborate? Right, so as I said first, this is about collaboration. This is not about competition. One example from Moldova. Not long time ago, when Moldova first saw the rise of mobile payments and digital wallets, many thought that it was going to be like the end of traditional banks. Yet, that actually didn't happen. What happens is that banks partner with different fintechs, for example, bringing QR payments and transfers way faster with different customers. So actually, collaboration became competition. Let me then just give you an image. As you know, it's worth more than 1,000 words. This is not about boxing against each other. That was actually part of the past. What is the future? Actually, is the present these days, is that both banks and fintechs shake hands and they collaborate. As I said, let's see a few examples of global and regional overview. In terms of global perspective, again, okay. In the UK, as you know, the UK launched the Open Banking Initiative. This was a government-led initiative by the UK government, whereby they allowed different customers provide consent to share their personal data that was held by banks to be provided to third parties that were, as they call it, third trusted parties, in order to share that data for bringing new innovative products. Another example comes from Singapore. Singapore, as you know, they launched the sandbox, and the sandbox, as you probably know, is a testing environment which is very controlled by the regulator. It is also limited in time, and once the cohorts test, the cohorts meaning the fintechs test, as you know, their product, they can launch in the market. The Singapore example is very I would say important worldwide, because they have even shaped in different segments. They have like the regular sandbox for, let's say, the usual business models. They have a Sandbox Express for, let's say, light touch, low risk regulatory solutions. And finally, they have these Sandbox Plus, which is where they assign a case officer, and that case officer helps fintechs to navigate through the regulation as well as through the financials that they need to put in place to make their fintech model sustainable. And that is possible, again, through this collaboration between the regulator in this case and fintechs. Another example from the European Union, as you know, PSD2 allowed open banking, allowed the sharing of data. It's a payments directive, and as you know, we are now discussing the third edition, PSD3. Right, let's see a few examples of collaboration in closer markets so that you may say, no, but this is not applicable to our country in Moldova, but look, in in Romania, for example, in Romania, Banca Transilvania made very interesting inroads with, for example, Pago for utility payments. They had partnered with Druid for developing their own chatbot solution. They partnered with Personetics to provide agentic AI solutions to their digital customers. But also in Poland, as you know, Poland, nearby market as well, they launched BLIK. The BLIK initiative was a consortium of different banks. One of them is this bank, PKO Banka Polski, and they have also partnered with different fintechs to become more competitive in the marketplace. For example, they introduced e-signature with Authentic. Authentic is a Polish e-signature firm. Vindicat for vindication platform, so collecting overdue debts. That's another example. And even closer, Ukraine, we have Monobank, which is a very interesting case of a digital play. It's a digital bank. Obviously, they didn't have the permission to launch their services at the beginning, so they did, for example, as Revolut did in the early days before they got their license, they piggyback from the license of somebody else, in this case, Universal Bank. And they were an early adopter of DIA. DIA is probably one of the most successful e-govern platforms that you can see worldwide. They actually collect, I would say, almost every single public service that you can get in Ukraine through this platform. And through Monobank, you can access tax payments, paying your fines, traffic fines, getting access to, for example, SME financing through different instruments that the Ukrainian government is offering. So I think this sets the scene towards what we believe is the status quo of Moldova today. Moldova has a lot of interesting strengths, a growing fintech ecosystem. We know this. Let's see just the audience that we have today compared to 3 years ago. 3 years ago, there were a lot of free spots. This very morning, people were standing all around the place because they didn't find a good spot to sit. So that, I think, gives an idea of what is happening today. You have very strong ties to EU. You are in the process of getting accession to the European Union, and you have an increasingly digital population. Let's see some fact sheets about this. So this tiny country, Moldova, actually has very good strengths, as I said, growing fintech ecosystem, heavy reliance on remittances, and there is this SME gap, increasing adoption of digital, but obviously with some trust gaps that still remain, especially in, let's say, low-income population segments, which, by the way, happens everywhere. What are the opportunities? Well, there are a few of them. For example, 15% of your GDP is composed by diaspora remittances. What if we put together a solution between the banks and different fintechs to make them very cost effective, i.e. extremely cheap, very fast, so we figure out something that piggybacks the existing rails of MIA for instant payments so that we can provide this instantaneously. Well, this is something that may look like this is science fiction, but actually it's not. Another angle is SME financing gap. As you know, all SMEs, of course, fintechs, startups are always struggling to get finance. What can we do? Well, we have very interesting examples. One of them could be factoring. We could think of an online platform whereby we discount our invoices and get paid before the invoice is due. As you know, this is something that is in very mature markets. This is, I would say, pretty much bread and butter these days. But in markets like Moldova, I think there is a very, I would say, huge opportunity, if you allow me to, for the market to think of these kind of solutions. Right, so I'm about to finish, but before I do so, how we can collaborate. There are three pillars, as I said, because actually there are three main stakeholders. The first one is the banks. What are the banks providing with? The banks provide, as you know, scale, infrastructure, and trust. Why? Because at the end of the day, banks are the ones that hold the client base. The banks are the ones that allow us to let's say, interact with the financial systems for the first time. Here you have a few examples. MIBE, as you know, they launched the first solution in Moldova that allows not only local citizens but also the diaspora to open an account using their mobile app with Face ID. Victoria Bank partner with SaltEdge for, as you know, open banking solutions. You also have, from the fintech perspective, as you know, fintechs bring speed, bring innovation, bring another way to think out of the box, which is creativity at the end of the day, and they master very interesting solutions. Here you have a few examples. Finergy developing Mia POS solution that integrates merchants with Mia instant payment systems, Credit Prime, and whatnot, the regulator. The regulator, as you know, they are now thinking about launching, actually it's not a technical sandbox per se. I've been talking with Ludmila earlier to see if this was actually the case. This is based on this research. And well, what Ludmila told me is that if you're a fintech and you want to test your products, you just need to call the National Bank of Moldova, and she will be super happy to support you in testing your product. As you know, the National Bank is also an innovator. They were one of the first central banks that launched retail rails for instant payments. Right, so as a conclusion, collaboration by design. What do we mean by this? Well, let's move from local adoption to a regional hub. As you know, this is where you are. And as I told you before, there are interesting strengths like, for example, huge diaspora, SMEs hungry for finance, and so on. So what can we do? Well, there is a very interesting, inspiring example. This is coming from Georgia. You don't need to think that big. It will be very difficult for Moldova to compete against well-established markets like Singapore, Hong Kong, London, Berlin, Silicon Valley, in California, etc., etc. So how can we spot ourselves? Well, these guys from Georgia made a very interesting inroad because they try to be perceived on a global scale as a regional champion. They're in the Caucasus. The Caucasus geographically divides, let's say, part of, let's say, Europe versus Asia. They're neighboring Central Asian countries, all the extents, you know, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, etc. And what they are aiming to do is to bridge the gap between those Silk Road countries and the European Union. And why not think in the same terms and figuring out if Moldova can place a role in, let's say, Eastern European countries. You have the Baltics, which are very strong contenders, but get what? They are even smaller than Moldova is in terms of population, and they have been able to do very interesting inroads in the fintech ecosystem. So why Moldova would not be able to do so? That would be what I'd like to wrap up as this collaboration. So what is the call to action? Interestingly, this is a quote from last year. from a fintech general manager that I met, actually in the coffee in the premium area. He said that our biggest challenge isn't the idea, it's getting a seat at the table with the bank and the regulator. All right, so I think this is less and less the case. As you know, the National Bank is becoming increasingly open. That's why they launched this test environment. But nevertheless, our call to action would be, on the one hand, that the banks open their doors for co-creation. That means that you guys, you bankers, despite how big your IT teams are, there is no need whatsoever to develop everything in-house. Let others do the creativity. They're very innovative, they're agile, they're not bound by the bureaucracy and the permits and the authorities that, and the permissions and what else you need to have in order to launch a product in a bank. Whereas if you partner with a fintech, this can be done much, much faster. Regulators, they should, as you know, create a safe environment so that financial stability is always preserved. And finally, fintechs, the only thing they need to do is innovate with responsibility. And that would be all from my side. If we collaborate at the end, as I said, I believe that Moldova can lead. So let's go for it. Thank you very much.